All right, troops, strong and conditioned, live and direct from Glasgow, Scotland. And tonight I'm happy to announce my guest, who is a fellow Scotsman, which is quite a novel experience considering it's mostly Americans that I speak to. So this should be a fun show. However, I will put a disclaimer up there. My accent may revert back to type, and that's what happens when you meet a fellow Scotsman. In fact, it might even get worse at times, so be warned. Anyway, we have the one and only Andy McKenzie from IronMacFitness. Andy, how are you, brother?
Yeah, I'm really good. I think this is probably going to be the most Scottish podcast I've ever done because my accent's gradually coming back to full spectrum, so I'll be mindful as well.
So, Andrew, or Andy,
Andy, please, only I'm in trouble if I'm called Andrew.
whereabouts in Scotland are you from, Andy?
Do you know Barhead at all?
I know it very well. I know it very well.
Right, bottom scheme.
I don't know the individual parts of Barhead. I
Right,
know
well,
I've been there a good few times throughout my life, but
it's the
I'm not.
part that you actually drive through really quickly. Otherwise you get robbed. So essentially, it's built on schemes. So you've got like we were called the bottom scheme, where like the riffraff went. But I think that's when I grew up there. But it's changed like quite a lot. I was back home maybe about 6 months ago, and it completely transformed from when I was growing up, which is actually great to see. A lot of things have actually changed, and but when I was growing up, it was quite a rough place, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah, is that near the train station at all?
Yep, it's probably about a 10, 15 minute walk from a train station, so you can see it go past. It's that rough estate when you if you ever get the train from Barhead to Glasgow.
Yeah, I think I know exactly the scheme you're talking to. And for any of my foreign listeners, a scheme is what is otherwise known as a housing estate in Scotland. And um, during Andy's heyday, which I would imagine would have been round about, what age are you, Andy?
47, I'd think
You're
about that. Yeah,
still a young
47.
stag, mate. But the 80s, these places were quite hairy. They really were quite hairy. And I can empathise with that because I'm from Maryhill in Glasgow,
Oh wow, yeah, Maryhill.
uh, but I'm originally from Ruckhill, which is next door to Maryhill. And it was a hellhole when I was growing up, to be honest with you. Thinking back, the changes in Glasgow over the last 20 years have been quite astounding.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I see probably bigger changes than yourself because I left when I was 16. I joined the military when I was 16, and then I mean since then I've been back maybe once or twice a year, and I see monumental changes and leaps. Whereas when I think I wouldn't feel good if my kids grew up in that environment. I mean, I've got two children now, and I wouldn't want them to grow up in the environment that I actually did because it was when I think about it, it was completely unsafe, too much drugs, even stabbings, and just ridiculous in terms of as you can imagine. But yeah, but thankfully it's changed now. That I think that reputation's actually gone, but it's quite a rough environment. I had quite an interesting childhood.
Yeah, one of the things that was really prominent in the Glasgow area during that time was gang culture. And I'm sure this is something that you remember yourself. There was a point where your life was pretty much confined to like two or three streets because if you embarked out with those streets, there was a serious chance you would get a doing, as we say in Scotland, which means severely beat up.
I've not heard that for years. I keep on doing. Yeah, I mean, it's probably why I can actually run quite fast because it was like that when I was in. We had a gang. It was years ago. It was called the Young Bowery, and the next town would have been Nits Hill. So you would fight the Young Bowery would fight the Nitsies. And what you would actually do, you would go up onto the railway, and you would literally walk along the railway until you met, and there was like a bridge in the middle, just by a graveyard, and we would meet there and have an all out, like, scrapping you. But you're talking like back then it was like baseball bats with nails in it, nunchuckers with shurikens. Like, just when I think back, it's like, what were we even thinking about back doing that sort of stuff? But yeah, I can just remember doing that and running as fast as I could. And then when I joined the army, I had a really good, like, fitness time, purely because of my youth was spent sprinting from fights and stuff like that, mate.
It's funny that you say the young Bowery because my father was from South Nits Hill.
Right, oh, was he?
And yeah, and funnily enough, when he passed away, we spread his ashes in a place near Barhead, which is called Craigie Hill.
Craigie Hill, aye, the Craigie. I was up there. Beautiful place, mate.
Yeah,
Really
yeah,
nice,
yeah.
aye.
We spread
Craigie's.
his ashes up there, so that's
Did you?
so
Yeah,
I
that.
think pardon.
Yeah, no, that's probably one of the places I go back to every time. It's almost one of the last places that's untouched. Whereas every time I go back, everything's changed. Like all the two schools that I went to are flattened down, are now academies. Um, the routes that I used to go running when I was training for the army, you can't run down anymore because the housing scheme's actually changed and different things like that. But the Craigie's the last thing that's actually been untouched, and it's a beautiful place. We used to go and roll Easter eggs down there, and you can't swim there now because I think they've changed it. But we used to spend, like, a lot of summers there. So you'd walk from the scheme to the Craigie, which is a good couple of miles actually. Spend a day there, which swimming, and then, like, walk back. So it's fantastic. A
Ah,
nice
it's
place.
beautiful up there. It's beautiful up
Mm,
there. There's a good view, really good view.
yeah.
All right, so Andy, can you give the people who are unaware of your presence within this fitness sphere, can you give them a brief rundown as to how you got into the world of fitness and where it's taken you to this point?
So I'll try and, like, keep it as my experience is, like, really varied, and I'm really sort of, like, thankful for that. So and I'll try and make it as concise as possible, and then you can sort of ask questions from there. I joined the army when I was 16, and you could probably say that prior to that, I'd always trained. So, like, I had brothers, and I grew up with the time of, like, Rocky and Bruce Lee movies and different stuff like that. So, like, bodyweight training and was a big part of that, and that was just, like, the first access in. So I joined the army at 16, and then I stayed in the military for 16 years, and I'd done, like, various things within that. Um, Very sort of, like, operations, like Iraq, Sierra Leone, Macedonia, different places like that. And then I had quite an unfortunate accident where I fractured my spine, and that changed the course of direction within the military and led me down to the path of going into the gym side, and the physical development side. And then from there, it's quite hard to sort of, like, explain to somebody who's never been in the military, but essentially I ended up part of what's called, like, pre-parachute selection. So you're on the staff that train airborne forces. So I ended up working on there for, like, 2 or 3 years. Then I progressed on to recruit training, which is essentially people coming into the military, getting up to a certain level of fitness, ready for to serve, and then continue there. So I spent a year there, and then I went through, like, another, like, 2 year process called Army Physical Training Corps, which is a really intense period where you learn everything from bodyweight training all the way up to gym. Then you learn how to manage gyms, and there's quite a lot of other things that come off that. Once I'd finished that, I was then selected to go and specialise in rehabilitation. And because of my, like, original injury, and where I spent a lot of time in a place called Headley Court, I spent about a year and a half there on my rehab. And that was the catalyst for change for me. I thought, I love that job. I can't do the thing that I really want to continue doing in the military. So this is the next best thing for me. So I was thankfully I got chosen to actually specialise in rehab, and spent another. So that was sort of 2 years on the physical training side, then another 6 months into the rehab side of it, and I eventually went back to recruit training, On the other side is the rehab guy, and spent a year there. Then at that time, I decided I was going to leave the military because I had a passion to work in rugby, and I set myself some goals. So it was pretty much like I want to have these certain levels as a strength and conditioning coach. I want to work in professional rugby, own my own gym, like etc. etc. And then at that time, I was lucky because I was able to like work as a PT. Then I ran like a boot camp at the same time I was doing rehab, and then I was also working with like different rugby teams. So I was at that time just super busy, and I guess I'm really thankful because I was able to grow as a coach without the pressures of trying to run a business or try to do social media and stuff like that. So you're talking like pre Facebook and stuff like that that I learned to be a coach and implemented. So I then, when I left the military, I then worked for a rugby team called Celtic Crusaders, and like ran their academy. And then at the same time, I worked at the an establishment called Special Forces Support Group as the rehab guy. Did that for about 2 years, and then from there, I just felt like I was doing the same thing over and over, almost like so. Rugby was like paint by numbers, and I just wanted like different challenges. So I then thought, right, I want to open up my own gym, and then just that way I work with a whole range of like different athletes and just normal people as well. So I ended up doing that and moved away from rugby, opened up my own gym, and did that for about 2 or 3 years whilst I was with a lower level rugby squad. And then from there, I I think I just hit a point where I was completely like burnt out flat. Then I closed that gym. Took 2 or 3 years to travel, but that travel was actually I ended up spending time in Russia with Klokov in the weightlifting school. Time in Greece. I've got really good friends out in Slovenia. So I just really wanted to really branch out as a coach and learn from as many different people as I can. And then that brings me to where I am now in Cirencester, where I've got my own sort of like private studio. I'm mentoring other coaches as well. So there's clearly like a lot there, and that's as condensed as I can try and make it. And I've probably missed out loads. So I've got a really, like I said at the start, I'm really thankful that I've got a broad range of experience, but that I had at a time where I had no pressure, but just to actually learn and master my craft. So I'm really thankful for that. Whereas I see young coaches and people who are getting into the industry now, and they've got a lot more pressure from a learning perspective.
Yeah. In what way would you say?
What would you mean?
Like, in what way have they got a lot more pressure from a learning perspective?
Because I think rather than probably the inability to focus, because when you look at the distraction that social media provides, I just think rather than learning something and then going away and practicing it, gaining experience, and then from there, that will allow you to raise your own questions. It's very easy then to like stumble on Instagram, whatever social media channel you actually use, look at something from say like an influencer that's got a lot of views, especially if you're young and you think, oh, that must be the way that I actually have to approach training. Or if somebody's very dogmatic with like how they view fitness, where it's like it must be that. So if you're a kettlebell guy, then everything's about the kettlebell. Whereas I was very much, I just seen everything as a tool and
Yeah.
everything as a vehicle. And at the same time, is like I really enjoyed bodyweight training. That's my big thing. That's the thing that I always fall back to. I think for me that's like a fundamental. But when you see everything else portrayed now, it's almost like oh, bodyweight's basic. Just almost skip past that as quickly as you can.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the issues that I see from coaches. They don't really appreciate that like immersion into the craft.
Yeah. I absolutely agree with that. And it kind of strikes me quite hard because I was one of those guys who like just cast body weight training aside because I was drinking from the free weights or hypertrophy Kool-Aid where you think, right, you can't achieve gains by doing body weight, but how wrong was I? How wrong was I? So there's a lot to pick apart there because you've done quite a lot, Andy. But the first thing that grabbed my attention there was your mention of Bruce Lee and how that was a influence in your training when you were trying to get into the army. So what kind of training were you doing at that point? Because back then, training information was not what it is now. It was limited. You had to make more of an effort to find it. So how did you go about with regards to getting yourself into a physical state to get accepted into the army?
You've got a couple of strands off that, and when I look back at that point, what information was there? There almost like none. I think there was one book written by a karate guy, and it was called The Pursuit of Excellence, and I still got the book. And when you look at the actual training, the bodyweight training, the squats, they were just awful. So I used that book, and then there's the other one of like hand me down information, like my dad's friends. Pardon me. They were like quite big into training, so they would come and show me different stuff. So you've got that handed me down information from like my dad's friends. My older brothers were physical in terms of we used to box and go up to the local boxing club, and obviously bodyweight training and circuits and stuff like that were really prevalent there. And then when I was around, there was like a community action group. So one of my first coaches, and probably like one of the biggest influences from a male perspective that I'll always remember, is a guy called Frankie King, and he was a kickboxing coach and done like Cali Eskrima and different stuff like that. And that's when I literally fell in love with like the discipline of like martial arts and then the bodyweight training like beyond that. And sometimes when I'm coaching, I can actually see the way that he put across information that I would actually do the same. And even when I'm, it's funny, like even when I'm smelling old bag mitts and stuff like that, I can go right back to like some of his classes because he was not such a real good character. You know, somebody who's really calm.
Yeah.
But there's like that undertone of like very powerful, but not really belligerent and stuff like that with it. So he was one of those guys. Whereas when I think about everybody else in the housing scheme at the time, was they were either like a drug dealer or they were in and out of jail. You mean like real like rough sorts and real bad characters, and then you've got somebody who, like Frankie King, was like a genuine beacon of this guy's something else, like quite calm, quite pleasant, really nice manner. But like when you got on the pad work and stuff like that. So yeah, he was great, and he like showed me some running routes and told me where to run and different stuff like that, and build up like my capacity. So I did lots of you can imagine there, squats, lunges, press ups, sit ups, little things like that. But I mean, very limited, but yeah, that was pretty much awesome. And that was all
And
from looking back at watching Bruce Lee movies and stuff like that as a kid.
yeah, and like, did you just throw yourself into training then? There was no idea of recovery at that point. It was just train as often as you can.
You're looking at a 13, 14, 15-year-old. There was no talk of recovery back there. You just train. You know what I mean? So I think that's where people they confuse themselves because they look for too much information, where sometimes you've actually just got to start, and then the roadblock that you actually hit will allow you to ask the right question. Whereas if you really want to procrastinate, you can sit forever and ever, look at training and feed your mind, but your body will just be like, when are we going to start? So I think that's one of the problems. Again, just with like information overload. So if I think back then, I never had anything. So all I had was just the intensity of a 14, 15-year-old at that time, and then
Yeah,
just getting on with it.
yeah. It's almost like recoveries became an industry within itself.
It's important, yet people can use that to not train hard enough. I think, do you know what I mean? Oh, I need to recover. And it's like, no, you actually need to exert yourself a little more for your body to actually really need the recovery. And that's what I see. I think probably become a wee bit too soft to some
Yeah.
degree.
You remind me of a guy I used to do Olympic lifting with years ago. He was an ex-Commonwealth Games competitor, and this guy used to go for 10-mile runs after he would do his training sessions. But he was training in the 80s. Like, if you'd said recovery to this guy, he would have thought recovery was just going to your bed at night.
Hmm.
That was
Well,
recovery to these guys.
Well, if you probably think about that, right, that's probably the best recovery you can actually get. Sound sleep. I mean, what more do you actually need? Whereas nowadays, you've got too many distractions, lack of sleep, and that's going to have like a massive cascade effect. So if you think of the sheer simplicity of that without distractions, then, but I mean, again, I think everything's got its place, and a lot of people sort of hark back to like the good old days and stuff like that. There's certainly like technological advances, and I think I sort of swing back and forth. I think the information out there is fantastic. I mean, and I'd have loved that now as a kid because I would at that time I would have been soaking up more, but because I never had anything to actually read. I mean, I reread over and over that book. It's dog eared, and then the next book I got off that was a bodybuilding book by Albert Beckles. And like anybody, it was a bit like beginner. I'm going to go for the advanced routine. So me and my brother were like doing Albert Beckles' fucking bodybuilding routine with a shitty old weeder bench and like plastic weights and stuff like that. You know, like when I look back, like 4 sets of 20 leg extensions and just like chaos, but you were just getting on with it.
Do you think if you did have access to that information back then, it would have held you back?
Difficult. I've always thought about that in terms of what would I be like if I was subject to what kids have got access to now. I think I'd just be the same as them. I think I'd be overwhelmed, too much information, too distracted. I think a young, I think a young mind actually needs direction from mentors and good solid men rather than what's online. Because one of the things about online, for example, and the information is you can be led down a path as much as you can have that with like guys as well. But if you think about if you think about really good, solid training gyms or martial arts environments, mate, where you've got good senseis and coaches and guys who teach, I think they're in a much, much better position to actually pass their knowledge on to young men. And I think that's where there's a real need for genuinely strong coaches who are humble and who want to like pass on their knowledge. And that's the danger of everything being online and nobody having that in-person contact. So I think there's a lot of value in that. I don't know if that answers your question.
You know, no, it does. I'm just like, it makes me think that they say that knowledge is power, but when you look at it through a fitness lens, it almost seems like too much knowledge. It makes you less powerful in some respects.
Knowledge is only power if applied in the right way, though. And it's that thing of like power reveals like the person, like who they really are. So, I think when it comes to fitness, one of the things that I try to do is give people context. So whenever I'm trying to explain something, to give them an idea, just so that they can take on board the information and think about it for themselves. So then they can say, well, I might be able to apply that in this way. But I think one of the things we need to the hurdle that needs to be met with fitness is getting people to actually take the first step. I prefer, from a coaching perspective, I like it when people come to me and it's almost like they've battered and beat themselves up and they've got broken because I know they've got something about them and they just need that direction. And that's all that I'm trying to do as a coach. But there's that danger of like you just continually put information out there. And I think really what we have to do is consider, why am I putting this out here? What can I actually teach and what questions can maybe this raise for other people who are actually watching it? And
Yeah.
that's why you have to maybe really consider. especially you, if you've got you've clearly got a following on YouTube and Instagram and stuff like that as well. So it's just considering what you actually put out there. I think it's important.
Yeah, yeah. So, like that was quite an interesting point when you talked about people who come to you. Let's talk about the people who come to you. Do people come to you as like they're just getting into fitness and they want expert help from the get-go? Or do you find that people come as a last throw of the dice, that they've tried everything and they need that mentor who's going to finally show them the right way to get the results that have eluded them over the years?
I don't think beginners warm to me. I don't think I'll probably not get like a welcoming persona to get beginners through the door. And a lot of people look at my training and think, oh, that's too much for me. But then essentially, when they get through the other side, you think, oh, I wish I'd done this earlier. I tend to see people who are at the last bit where they might have been through 2 or 3 trainers, they might have seen a physio, because I tend to deal with people who have maybe, because of my rehab background, have damaged their shoulder, hurt their back. So I write programs to get them back pain free and then get them to do the fundamentals and essentially just give them what they should have actually had at the start, and not skip the process. Because again, it's like everybody. If you ask somebody in fitness like how do you get strong, they're 9 times out of 10 their first answer would be squat, bench, and deadlift, 3 sets of 5, and it's like, well, hold on a minute. There's more to strength than just like barbell. You can build strength on machines, but you can certainly build up like years of layered strength doing bodyweight training and core training that will actually really complement your barbell stuff when you get to there. So that's so I tend to see people who are pretty much at that last bit, and it's like, what can I do? And it's, let's go back to the basics. And the great thing is, because they've already trained and they just need a few tweaks, within a couple of weeks, it's like body feels great and they're enthused again, and then they want to do more. But the other one is because they've essentially done body weight in the right way and they've seen you can actually get some fantastic gains. So I'll give you an example. Like during the lockdown, that really played into my strengths, like writing bodyweight programs and stuff like that. And I run like an online group, and the guys in the online group, like I'd say over 60% of them have actually kept with bodyweight training at home, because they get better results, they felt better, and their body was in better shape because they just took away the lot of stress of like traveling to the gym, traveling back, being in an environment they didn't actually feel comfortable in. So that was like a real eye opener for like people and looking at how good bodyweight training is. So yeah, that's how I tend to work with people.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that about bodyweight training, because that sounds really similar to my experience. To go back to what I said earlier, when I never had a favourable view of it, but during lockdown is when I discovered bodyweight training as well. Well, not discovered it, but started to implement it in such a way. And it was almost like a weight came off my shoulders, because it meant that I knew that I was not just confined to having to leave the house and travel in order to get a productive workout. If anything, the workouts I was getting in my living room were far more productive than anything that I'd ever got in a gym. And I think it was because I bought into the concept once I got past that 2 week period of where I was immersing myself. And when you have that belief in the system, I think you're always going to get results.
Yeah, but when you consider that, you were almost, everybody was forced. And I think again, it's like, I always, when people say bodyweight training is easy, then I just send them a couple of sessions and say, try that. Or the other one that I say is like drop down, and if you can't do 60 push-ups, I think you're weak. I mean, that's one of my markers, even within the group. And I think there's a difference. So for me then, because this riles some people, but I think a healthy man should train twice a week. he should be able to do 30 push-ups after like a year of training or so. But that's just like a general standard of health. But anybody who's actually trained, who takes their training seriously, and then beyond the 5 year mark, you should be able to do 60 push-ups without question, and that's not like a warm-up and all the fancy stuff to get you going there. But like, so that's a good marker. And if you can't do that or you struggle, then for me that raises question about like where your body is actually at. But just to really enforce a couple of things there, it's what you've got to do at the end of this is really find out what's your standard. So for me, my standard is like a minimum of 30. So if I ever drop below that, so if I was ever unable to do 30, there'd be clearly something wrong with my training. I'd have literally went down a path that's wrong for me or wrong for my physical standards. So that'd be it. And then the other one is I always want to be in and around that 60 mark. So there's a fluctuation. So, and this is what I try and get across to people: have a standard that's set for yourself. So you might think, oh, 60 is ridiculous. That's absolutely fine, but choose something that's appropriate for you. But there needs to be a minimum, and I think the minimum for a healthy male who trains twice a week after a year should be 30. And if it isn't, then you really need to look at what you're actually doing, because I think that's something that's really achievable.
What's the standard for these push-ups? Is it Royal Marine push-up standard?
There's no standard for a push-up. There's a push-up and there's a push-up, isn't there?
Yeah, but
if you think about it,
do you have a protocol where like they have to rest, like there's a second with chest to floor, full lockout? Because some people can just go for that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's two ways you can actually approach it. Like, I normally it's got to be chest to floor. So, like for me, then I say there's 3 C's that touch the floor: your chest, your chin, and your cock. So, so it depends how well hung you are. So you can, if you're up there, but so essentially you've got to get 3 bits. You've got to have body contact with the floor, and then full extension of the arms, and the other one, but I don't like to think about tempos or anything like that. You just rep it out and smash them out that way. But from a training perspective, I tend to do a lot of hand release press ups. But hand release arm, hands come off the floor. I extend my arms out to the side like that. So that way you get a little bit of stretch in the bicep and stuff like that as well. And then hands back in. And the great thing is from there is you have to sort of like really activate. And I tend to pulse core. So when I'm doing push-ups, I like to squeeze my abs and push at the same time. So effectively what I'm trying to do is get the push-up to feel light and explosive in every single rep, rather than this sort of like slow up and down sort of like grind. So I tend to do that.
The push-up's a wake-up call for a lot of guys, because like you'll remember this, like when I was growing up, your uncles would challenge you to doing push-ups. You would go to your grannies and your uncles would be there and they'd be like, hey, do 100 push-ups, wee man. And you would just start repping them out. So you've got that childhood memory of push-ups locked in your head. And then you go for a gym induction. And the gym instructor says, can you do a push-up? And guys will always say, I can do a push-up. I can do a push-up. And then you'll see them attempt a push-up and they struggle to like perform one. And you can almost see that like that reality just flood through their heads, because they've been locked into that childhood memory, thinking that I can bust out 50 push-ups at will, and then they're there lying flat in the ground. It's like a massive red pill moment for a lot of guys when they start the gym.
Yeah, it's almost a shit. What have I let myself in, or how much I've actually let myself go? I think that creeps up. Yeah, but I think it's humbling. At the same time, if people really commit to that pathway of that body weight and core and just doing like low level aerobic, you can actually build. I wouldn't really say much like a great physique, because that's always going to come like in time. But you can actually feel really good about yourself, and I think that's one of the first things that I try and get people to embrace is the feel good factor of doing exercise. And that's the thing that I want to try and capture, because if they can have that feel good factor, they will do it again and again. And that's what I'm trying to get when I'm getting people training again.
Yeah, that feel good factor should always like run in synergy with progression. When people see their numbers going up, particularly in an exercise that they can execute anywhere, they're always going to get that wee burst of confidence, which is then going to increase the chances of adherence to that particular move.
Yeah, I think
So
that's why. Sorry, that's why I think people should like have performance related goals rather than weight loss goals and things like that. Because one of the things with weight loss, it does stagnate very, very quickly. As soon as you get that
yeah,
initial drop, it does stagnate, and then people get demotivated, especially when it's you get too much of a fluctuation up and down on the scales. So I
yeah,
tend to just remove that and just think, look, train for performance in terms of so one for me, performance would be making you feel good, but then seeing like an improvement on technique. You know, I mean, a progression from say hands elevated press ups to maybe press ups on the hands on the floor. So that would be a performance progression. Same as like the building towards like a chin up, like starting off the floor. Everything's performance based. So if you look at that as a metric, it's like, hey, you've done 11, now you can do 13, 14. That's like a great jump. Do you know what I mean? Let's
yeah,
head
yeah,
towards 15.
yeah,
Whereas so that progression is incremental, and I always find that continually moves. Now that
yeah,
scale.
yeah,
Whereas when you're looking at weight loss, it's like there's too many fluctuations, and people tend to
yeah,
get pissed off, and then it's like, oh, then they start going back to the start, and it's just a waste of time. So if you
yeah.
go from a performance perspective, it's better.
So, does that tie in with the military mindset in the respect that it's all about being understanding of what you can control? And weight loss, you can only control to a certain degree because the only thing you can control is the amount of calories you consume on a daily basis. After those calories have been consumed, it's out of control. You can't determine how much weight you're losing. Also, factor in that the scales are going to give you different readings on a daily basis. You're not going to have a true idea of what's taking place there and then. Whereas when you switch over to the performance based mindset, you have total control. You've got the ability to train, you've got these systems that you can employ within your training. Therefore, you have got more control over your progress. And if you then focus on that aspect, you are going to get better results, which will feed into other areas of your fitness journey, so to speak.
Yeah. Essentially, you've got a lot more levers to pull when it comes to training rather
Yeah,
than diet. And I think especially when somebody's maybe failed about 4 or 5 diets, or sometimes even more, and then you just say, look, for the minute, I don't worry about diet. All I want you to do is I want you to focus on training. And that is like I want you to maybe get like a minimum of 20 minutes per day, and then we can add layers on top of that, and then you give them like body weight that's appropriate to their level, and then so if you think about how many progressions you can actually do, how much fun and changes you can have with training, and the key thing is that will make you feel better. So when you effectively feel better about yourself, you improve your confidence, and then slowly over time, you then sort of asking the right questions about diet, because it's a bit like, well, I can feel my body sort of like changing. How else can I assist with that? And then you can have that conversation. Well, look, if you look at your diet right now, if you start really focusing on protein, as a priority, that will help build that muscle, help with the recovery. And that's the only thing you've got to do. You can do everything else. Just have a little focus on that. But let's go back to training and let's try and change this and this. So for me, training, and again, if you look at the idea of not just being body weight, if that's all they've got, then your repertoire is like quite a lot. But if you go into the gym environment and then you can give people a combination of body weight, dumbbells, machines, you can it's infinite. You can change it up all the time. You can give people the same movement pattern that you want to try and improve as a coach, but it's
yeah,
different for them every single time. And I think that's the beauty about training. Whereas diet, I think, is generally like quite a challenge. And again, so that's my focus from training people, and that's how I tend to sort of get results is performance driven, focus more on the exercise, and then over time when they ask the question, that means they're ready to actually move to that level. But if I just push it here, eat fucking salmon on a Friday night, when it's that same old thing, and that you get given something, I don't really feel like that, and then it fails pretty much straight away at the start. So yeah, I think that's a better tactic that I employ.
Yeah. So how, like, do you get a lot of guys come to you who have only physique goals?
No, I'm not a physique goal type of guy. I'm not that guy. So yeah, I mean, short answer, no. They tend to be they want to lose a couple of pounds. Don't get me wrong, but the conversation is more about like the everything's dropped off. You know what I mean? If you think about it, as soon as your energy levels drop, and when you're overworked, you've got, and then that starts bleeding into the family home and different stuff like that. All of those things like spiral down. So at that point, you don't really like give a toss about a six pack or anything like that. You just want your energy levels back up so you can actually, like, manage your day to day. So that's the conversations we have. I get some guys who are like, oh, I want to look better, and it's like, cool, let's have a conversation about that. But right now, like, you don't sleep too well. You can't even hold down like say 3 or 4 training sessions a week. If I like boot you into a fat loss plan, you're just going to fail again, and you're going to jump on another coach. So let's just stand back a little bit and think, right, what's the one big thing that we can actually achieve initially to, again, get your energy levels back up, make you feel better about yourself, and then once you're into a real good groove, and you can handle load, you can handle stress in a positive way, then we can talk about physique goals. But this stems from the problems that I see are guys who've been on training too hard, fell off a cliff and got injured, and then dieting for too long as well. Do you know what I mean? Like way past 8 weeks. So I tend to have focus for 8 weeks. So I have like an 8 week sprint, and then have a full week maintain, so that you really like work hard. But then you need it's not like a rest and recovery like we spoke about before, but you need like a mental deload where you want to relax and everything, and that's the bridge that's really important. Then you go for like another 8 week, and you might focus on something else. But there's certainly a pathway that I think that should be followed to get people to that. So, but
Yeah.
that's what I certainly see. So, I mean, older guys who are like, say, maybe late 30s, thinking, oh shit, what my 40s are going to be like downhill, and I'm like, well, I'm nearly 50, and I feel completely like different from that. So that's the demographic that I tend to fill.
Yeah. So has the ways your life has changed by like having a family and getting older, has that changed your mentality with regards to training?
I don't know, more health conscious, and I think that's two factors. That's one, I'm now getting into my 50s, so I think that's a natural given. And then second one, I've got like a 2.5 year old and a 3.5 year old, and obviously that, from a health perspective, is thought, right, I need to really be like, uh, I've got a different sort of outlook from that respect. And then I've got the other one is, I don't want to be in my, say, 60s and 70s when I've got a son and daughter, and they're like young and in their prime and think they can challenge the old man. So I'll still have to keep something in my toolbox. You know, I'll have to have one thing that I'm actually good at. Probably be push-ups or chin-ups and stuff like that. Do you know what I mean? So, but yeah, I think with that lead, that's the only two changes. The other one as well is, this might sound strange, but I view training now as what my body actually needs. Whereas when I was in the military and I was training for like sport, and when I competed in, like different events and stuff like that, it was always for like, an outcome. It was almost
Yeah.
like it was too like goal, and I was always putting myself under pressure. I was like, "Fuck, I need to lift that, and I need to push here," and you know what I mean. So, and then when I'm on it, I'm a bit of a nightmare, so I can't get sort of like stuff done. I'm like, whereas now I can appreciate it in a different way, so I'm a bit more relaxed when it comes to training. But I
Yeah.
understand myself like a lot more as well. So I know instinctively, if I hang off the gym rings in the gym, and my grip just isn't quite there, then it's an
Yeah.
easy session for me, or I might even just go for a walk with the kids.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if it's like on and I'm gonna, like turn that into like dust, then it's on like big time. So and I
Yeah.
still like to train hard as well. When I see people like, oh, you've got to relax in your 50s, I'm like, you've got to maintain like a good level of intensity, and obviously and balance that up with like things at the other end, like walks with the kids and low level aerobic, like everybody's talking about now as well.
So, how did you make? I'm making an assumption here. Before you had children, I'd imagine you trained quite frequently because it's part of your job. It's your job. You need to look a certain way. You need to be able to perform a certain way. So, when you had your first child, you know yourself, everything goes up in the air when it comes to training. That was the story for me anyway. How did you make that transition from that training life to the new training life that comes after having children?
Hanging by a thread to try and keep onto my old ways. Yeah, certainly it's quite. I'll tell you, one of the things that I've found is maybe the first 2 years I lost a sense of who I was, because
Yeah,
I
yeah,
felt like I became a dad,
yeah,
and then I thought that was it. It was like, oh, I'm a dad now, and I lost me. And
yeah,
my training toned down. So like, instead of like, I'll give you an example. When I train, sometimes I train for maybe an hour, sorry, maybe 2 hours, sometimes three, depending on like what the session actually is. Whereas now it's like an hour max, and then sometimes it's like an hour and a half. But I used to train for longer. I like longer type sessions, especially when it comes to body weight. Um, and I orchestrated my life to actually accommodate that. With kids, you clearly can't do that, but I've reduced volume and trained like short and sharper. So one of the things I thought is, look, I've got a lifetime of training behind me. So like for the next sort of year at least, I can get away. And what I found was, you'd be amazed at what you can actually get done in 20 minutes. Do you know what I
yep,
mean? I've got like a 20-minute session, which is essentially like on the minute, every minute. You do 5 chins, 10 push-ups, 20 squats. And
yeah,
then, so if
yeah,
you think about that volume, and you've got to like get there fast, otherwise, because it starts to shorten. And you can do that. And the great thing about bodyweight training, you don't really need like an elaborate warm up. If it's going to be like barbell, or say like Olympic lifting or stuff like that, you've got to like prep the joints.
yeah,
Whereas with bodyweight training, I can tend to build into it and
yeah,
just get loads done in sort of like 20 minutes. Um, yeah, but like I did lose like me for a little bit, and I've only just started to get that back. I've actually started to get that intensity back in my training, and think, no, I want to like, actually sort of like, yeah, focus a little bit more and go hard again. So yeah, it was a
yeah,
bit of an odd 2 years. I don't know if everybody experiences that, but I certainly felt like I lost myself for a little bit.
yeah. Do you think that becoming a dad and having that limited time made you a better trainer in that respect because your decisions had to be more, they had to be smarter?
Made me more understanding of men with families in general. Whereas, we'll put it this way, right? Is I would never take time management or training advice off anybody who'd never had kids, because it's just a completely different thing. So, and again, so when I look back to, say, like my 30-year-old self, he would annoy me. If do you know what I mean? If I had me to be now, I'd be like, you haven't got a fucking clue, mate. Do you know what I mean? So, but I just lived a completely different life. So I'm definitely more um, empathetic with, like, people's time and stuff like that as well. Probably
Yeah,
more from the mother's side of it, because I can see how much they actually go through. And I've got a couple of females in my group who are mothers, and I just instinctively know that I just need to give them, and again, enough training to feel good and keep them actually going. Because for me, I think training should actually give you energy back, and I think
yeah,
that's one of the things where people get it wrong. And this is what I found was, I would go in and try and train like I did before, like say 90 minutes, and I'd feel wiped out. And I just thought, look, this isn't working for me, because if I keep feeling like that, I'm just going to avoid training altogether. And that's when I lowered down to these 20-minute sessions, and bodyweight like really come back in and was more like relevant in my training. And that's when I started to feel good again. And I was like, right, this is for me the real key about training, is that it should give me energy back to put into the family, be more present, with the kids. Because if I'm tired, I'm going to react in a different way to what they actually need.
Yeah.
Whereas I need to be like on point. I need to have my energy levels back. So, if, for example, if Coleman's having a meltdown, I can be there so that he can just melt and I can absorb it. Whereas if I'm tired, I'm just going to act like a child. And I've done that at the start. Where you're just like, so yeah, that's one of my biggest learning points, and I think that's where um, having I'm thankful that I've got a good understanding of training as well, when I know that what can be achieved. But again, I've trained for like a long time, so I could I could maximize like 20 minutes and get what I needed.
Yeah. Did your like ideas of recovery change as well when you had to factor in the lack of sleep that started to manifest itself?
I'll tell you one thing is with that, right, is when it comes to sleep, and this again is a big problem, Lee, with information. Because if you listen to the sleep experts, I think they cause sometimes more harm than good. Because all of a sudden everybody's, oh, I need to be optimum. I only got 7 hours sleep last night, therefore I'm going to feel tired. And the reality is, though, you can actually function on like a little bit less every now and again. You don't have to be too rigid with it. And I just found that initially I was like, you can talk yourself into it. I'm going to be sleep deprived. I'm going to be this, and then one day I just thought, well, hold on a minute. This is what it is. If I really start focusing on, so I used to have the old Whoop band and stuff like that, and like record my sleep, and I was like, this is just making me feel even worse. So the decision I made was like, look, do you know what? I don't need metrics. I don't need anybody to tell me whether or not I've had a good night's sleep, or whether it's 4, 5, or unbroken. I'm just gonna like get on with it and move through that way, and you'll be amazed about how better you actually feel, rather than making yourself feel guilty for not getting like the optimum 8 and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
that's how I feel about sleep now, mate.
Yeah. I think like the fitness has became this it's almost became a religious thing now where you get like the 10 commandments of fitness. Because I'm going to go on a tangent here, but I always think back to when I was growing up in the 80s and 90s, particularly the 90s, and like the clubbing was the biggest thing in the 90s. Everybody went clubbing in the 90s, and you would walk up, Great Western Road in Glasgow.
Yeah.
You would walk up Great Western Road, and there would be people looking for parties. And I was driving up there about a year ago on a Saturday morning, and all I seen was young people with big sports holdalls and protein shakes, and they're all going to the gym. And I was thinking, 20 years ago, you would have never seen this. You would have never seen this. It's almost like youth culture has completely turned on its head.
Mm.
But the culture is now that it's all about you must adhere to these commandments if you are to get the respect of people and to get any results. And it's like you said, it's you need to get 8 hours of sleep a night. You need to foam roll for 2 hours before a workout. You need to be doing, and I think that's one of the most off-putting things about fitness nowadays, where you have to adhere to these rules that are being placed by people who don't have those life experiences that older guys speak of, which is having children and having your whole life turned on its head.
Mm.
I mean, is that something that you can identify with?
Yeah. The again, it's going back to if you think about the information, and what you said there is one of the issues we've got right now is you're having people who are um, not not fitness coaches or experts per se. They're content creators. So rather than creating content and speaking from experience, they're just trawling the internet, what looks good, and then repackaging that, and then just adding one little thing and making it a little bit more appealing. And all of a sudden you've got to wake up at 4, you've got to meditate for an hour, you've got to, you know what I mean, and you've got, it's optimum, and then if you fall off that, then that's it, your gains will never be done. And it's like, well, hold on a minute. Like, if you look at when I was in my 20s, especially in the military, I mean, we were like essentially professional alcoholics. that could like go on the piss till 2, 3 in the morning, wake up at 7, go for a run, and that would be your hangover, and then have a full day's work, not eat the best food, and then go back and do that on repeat, but yet still be fit. But then when you look at people now saying, "Oh, like alcohol affects sleep and stuff like that," and don't get me wrong, that there is you should pay attention to that, but again, you've actually got to think like, where does that generally fit into my life? And the other one is this person, what is their life actually like, and therefore, can I really like take on board that information? So that's what I think people should actually really do now, and it's probably what I'll teach my son and daughter is to be able to think, like critically about things they actually see online, and just like dare to still question, or even if you see a post, then like fire back questions, say like, how did you actually come up with that, and do you actually live that yourself? Because you'll just find half these creators just are the ones that end up with the most like mental and physical problems, and then all of a sudden they find a cure, and then everything becomes that, and it's like the blind leading the blind, mate.
I think that the issue for a lot of these guys is they pigeonhole themselves into a niche, and then they need to become someone who they're not, and then it just becomes false in that respect, and they become confined where they can't change or pivot. They're just stuck there.
Yeah, I think there's a danger of again, if people create like a certain type of content that resonates, then they feel they have to like continue like promoting that. And I just think we should. Again, it's challenging because if you're young and you don't really know yourself, and therefore you're not really confident, and all of a sudden then you see somebody putting out that information, they get the accolades and everything that comes with that, and you can very easily put that up as a layer, and then all of a sudden, 2 or 3 years down the road, you just completely think, "Who the fuck am I?" And you see that again, these YouTubers. I've seen quite a few of them over the years because I've been around like a long time now. But I've just seen them sort of like come and go, and they've almost been chewed up and spat out. When it's like, just be comfortable with who you actually are, and just make sure that you put out the information that you actually live. And that's what I pretty much try to do. So I look at stuff, try it, and if it doesn't fit, then it doesn't fit. So, you know, what I mean, I don't wake up and have an ice bath and do mantras and things like that. I just wake up and get on with the day.
What is your wake up routine, Andy? About lion brew in the morning and an
Mate,
old square sausage?
square slice if I can get it, mate. That's what I love going back home with my sister. Square slice, torty scones, amazing. Yeah, I think
So
it'd be a different man if I still lived in Scotland. I don't know if I'd be who I am now, and a
really,
parallel universe.
and why would that be?
Um, I, I, I think if I'd have stayed around, your environment actually can shape you quite a lot. And I think
Yeah,
if I'd have stayed around the housing scheme and things like that, it would have been, as much as I'd like to say I felt different to everybody else when I was at school and stuff like that. I didn't really like follow the path of most people. Um, I think it would have been a fair sort of like challenge. I guess maybe that's what you see at the end of your life. Here's what you could have won, but I think it would have been like different. I think I had a fortunate escape by joining the military, then really expanding my horizon and getting to uh, flourish in different environments. I certainly had a good change in my first year because I had a year of like leadership training in my initial year in the military, and I think that was like a really good stepping stone into the next things that I'd done because I had really good strong male role models as well, and I think that's actually quite key. Whereas when I
yeah.
look at the housing scheme again, like your average characters, either you aspire to be a drug dealer, or or the local hard man. And when you think about that, it's like that's not really aspirational. So yeah, it
Yeah.
might have been different.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because that's one thing that's defined a lot of people's experience growing up in Glasgow or Balhead is that local hard man mentality, which just seems to be that dominant feature within these schemes. It was always the thing that was there.
Well, do you know the most guys who I grew up with are dead. So,
Yeah.
so if you look at that, I think there's about two or three out of a whole housing scheme, my age group, who are actually still alive, and they're just. I'd probably say they're existing as like an alcoholic or drugs or both. So
Yeah.
if you think about that, it's quite an environment that I've removed myself from.
So did you join the army to escape that environment, or was it another decision?
No, like my uncle was in two para, like second battalion parachute regiment, and I always remember him coming home and leave. And again, like that sort of like type of character. And then I got the book called The Making of a Para because we had like a local library, and I think that's where I got most of my that was the only source of knowledge back then. I remember getting that book and reading it cover to cover, over and over again, and I thought, right, that's what I want to do. And then when I I joined what's called Junior Leaders Regiment Royal Artillery. So I didn't go the parachute way because my uncle said, look, you need to get a trade, do that. So I went in this side, and I remember like the first couple of weeks being there and writing back home to my mum saying, look, I don't like it, can I come back? And she was a bit like, there is no coming back. There's no bed here for you. And I was like, that moment of it. Do you know what I mean? It must have been really hard for her to actually write that.
Yeah.
Because you can imagine, but that as soon as she wrote that back, something switched in me,
Yeah.
and that was like a real. It was almost. I remember that was quite a big thing for me. So I went into like, right, I need to, because I remember being in, and there was lots of like cadets and people who'd experienced of the military before, whereas I had like zero. So I was like, right, I need to really fucking up my game here. So that's when I just went, right. It was like bed blocks, practicing them while everybody was like chilling out. I like, right, I'm going to practice it over and over until I can do it with my eyes shut, because I don't want to be under pressure. I need to learn how to iron my kit so that I don't want to be under pressure, and because I
Yeah.
just felt that, and as soon as I hit that gear, then I progressed like quite quickly. I got like promotion and ended up becoming like a junior sergeant, like leading the Goshen parade and different stuff like that. So I think as soon as my mum done that for me, it was like quite a change.
Yeah.
I think it must have been quite tough for her as well to write that.
Yeah. Do you think that military background has allowed you to excel in your fitness career?
From the perspective of, like I said at the start, I amassed like a real wealth of coaching knowledge, so I could actually go wide and deep. And again, like because I never had any pressure. Also, I mean, you get discipline, and you understand that if you, I guess if you if you give yourself structure, so if you have like a clear start and a clear end to your day, then that gives you structure. And if you can like follow that, then you'll be ahead of the curve. And I think that's something I've always like kept. So I need structure, and if I've got that, I excel. And I noticed then when I first get out the army, I was a bit like, oh, I can do what the fuck I want, and it soon imploded because and again when people say I'm overwhelmed, one of the things I
Yeah.
say is you're not overwhelmed, you're actually not organized. And a lot of people aren't over when you actually dig into the weeds, it's like they aren't really organized. So if you actually get people to organize and structure their day a little bit better, that overwhelm tends to disappear because they
Yeah.
start getting things done. So
Yeah.
it's certainly like a pivotal part because you experience a lot more, and I ended up going into like an airborne unit, which is like a different level. You got to pass like a selection course to get on there. So you're in like a real alpha male environment. So you got to
Yeah.
grow up pretty fast. So I remember when I joined that after like I was only 17, and you sort of accelerate in who you are and what you need to be and stuff like that. So yeah, it was a good environment, tough at times,
Yeah.
but yeah,
Yeah.
certainly a great time.
Okay, so like I'm under the impression that bodyweight and calisthenics is the main exercise focus when you're in the military. Is that the case?
It's changed now. So I'll talk from when I was in, it was certainly like a lot of bodyweight training. I mean, that goes without saying, because when you go on operations, you haven't really got gym kit, and you have to either beg, borrow, steal, or it's pretty much like do push-ups, get a pole off the side of a wagon, and you're doing pull-ups, and then if you can sneak a couple of dumbbells and stuff like that, then you go there. But yeah, it has to be a lot of that. But when you're back in camp, then there's gyms there. So I mean, I did a lot of gym training, and I think for me, I'm not just a bodyweight guy. I've got a gym full of kit. I still
Yeah.
like Olympic weightlifting. I like squats, stuff with a barbell, and I think they're very, very complementary. And I think once you actually understand that the training and exercise is complementary, then you can take the blinkers off and you can actually enjoy a little bit more. But yeah, certainly like bodyweight trains like it is something, because you are tested. You're tested on press ups, sit ups, and then a mile and a half run. That's one of your basic tests. But I think now they've actually got more barbell or strength tests, which I actually don't know anything about. But
Yeah.
back in my day then, which is a good number of years now, certainly
Yeah.
bodyweight was. And the other one as well, Lee, it's effective. I mean, it's why it's still here. It's why in 100 years' time, doing a push up will still be hard. There'll still be a challenge. I mean, doing 30, doing 60, whatever your rep range is, like it will still be a challenge because you've got to do the work. And again, it's with anybody with training. When you get to a certain level, you will know that that guy has, or that girl has been diligent in their approach. They've actually went through the fire to attain that goal. So if you see like some of these out and out calisthenics guys, they are high level because they've actually. I mean, they're strong,
Yeah.
obviously, in a different sort of capacity to somebody with a barbell, but it's still strong. It's
Yeah.
still
Yeah. Absolutely.
effective training.
So, what advice would you give to people who are starting out with bodyweight training?
What are you talking from? Never trained before and just
Yeah,
starting to train?
absolute novice.
So I would say I wouldn't worry about getting a coach or anything like that. Not initially. I think if you're intelligent, you can look at a video and you can pretty much sort of like pick it up. And I think it's far better to go to a coach with here's what I have done rather than I'm starting fresh. So
Yeah.
that's the first one. If body weight's actually all you've got, I think you can actually get a lot of. I tend to advise people to do a lot of core training. I'm a big believer in core. So if you've done, for example, like a straight arm plank hold into dorsal raises, and then turned over and did some crunches, and then maybe into like a cobra exercise, which is like, so if you literally go front and back like that, and if you did that for a 2 minute circuit and went for a 2 minute run, and if you did that sort of like for 20 minutes a couple of times a week, that would be effective. Like
Yeah.
from the off, that would be enough exposure, because a lot of the problems with body weight down the line comes from lack of core control or lack of core strength. And even when you go into like a barbell training as well, a lot of the problems that I see are people who are lacking in strength in the middle. Therefore, when you actually like drag them back a little bit to that point, then you can tick that off. So I think core work and just plain old cardio, and even if it was like a skipping rope and core work, you would get quite a lot done. If you think about like a straight arm plank, for me, that's the beginning of the press up anyway, and I call that straight arm strength with relevance.
Yeah.
And then if you hang off a bar, that's the exact same. Hang off a bar and do straight arm strength with relevance. That's another one another exercise that I do. So I advise people to do a lot of core work and a lot of cardio. And again, here's the thing: it's very, very easy to do. It's not really going to be that taxing or that demanding. And when you've actually done it, you've obviously got the feel good factor that you've actually trained. So again, it's that first little bit that was actually achievable. I've actually done that. And then the next one is like then you can start to add in sort of like bodyweight squats or bodyweight lunges. Probably I'd say I get people to lunge more than squat, purely because a lot of people maybe have issues with the ankle or issue with the hip. So it's a lot easier for them to do like a reverse lunge or a step up, because that's something they do on a daily basis. So they can start that. That'll start getting the single leg strength going. Then once they've done that, so they've then got they can add that into the core. Then if they are genuinely really weak, you can do hands elevated press ups. I'd rather somebody elevated their hands rather than like bent their knee. I don't think that's I never have that. I've never had that as an aggression for a press up. I just don't think it's right. That hands elevated. So the way I tend to test people is or program bodyweight training is I get them just to do a max set, whatever they can do. So let's say, for example, if they can only do less than 10, then I'll get them to repeat that. So I might just say, look, do 3 max reps of press ups, hands elevated, and then let me know your score. When they reach like 10 repetitions and above consistently, so over like 3 sets, the next thing that I then do is I'll add on like another set, but I'll get them to the next one at 50%. So let's say they do 12 reps as a max, then I'll say, look, you're going to then do 4 reps at 6, and then you're going to do 5, and I gradually build them up that way. And the reason why I do that is for a beginner, I'd much rather that they do more sets and less reps, because then they can get a better quality of movement. And again, so I normally have a time block on that. So you do as many sets as you can. So you might do like, say, press ups. If you can do like a rowing type movement, then fine. But if you can't, then I get them to do like a lot of dorsal raises, cobras, like prone tees and different stuff like that. And that just gets them to build up the back muscles and allows the chest to actually open up. So if you think about that agonist-antagonist relationship, so that would be press-ups, say dorsal raises, press-ups, prone tees, a core exercise, reverse lunges or step-ups, and you do that as a circuit with cardio. And it's, sorry, I'll turn my, I don't know if that's coming up there. My messaging is going. Yeah, so I tend to do that for like a time, and once they hit like a certain amount of reps, then we can actually lower the height down for the press ups, and then when they've got on to like normal press ups in the floor, I pretty much start again like, right, what's your max? 50% of that, and then you build up the sets, and I think that's just a better way, because the key thing what I'm trying to do initially is not having people really struggle or strain. I think that's very, very easy to like push people too hard. And I always want people to genuinely feel like they've achieved something. So it's like, man, that feels good. So it's almost had the session. If we go back to what we spoke about before, I want people to feel energized after their session. But I mean, so one of the questions that people normally ask is, yeah, but it's max reps. But for me, then I'm very clear. Max reps is like your technical max. So as soon as you like feel like you can't do another push up, you stop pretty much there. So as soon as your form alters, so if somebody's with me, then as soon as I see like a slight change, I go right, that's your max, and then I reduce that score like that. And for me, that's probably one of the most successful ways of building people up, having a real quality movement pattern like over time, remaining either injury free or actually getting pain free if they've been in pain. So you can serve like 2 of those from just doing that, because you're having that graduated exposure, and again it's like quality reps. So if you think back to like what do you want muscle memory, you want a really good movement pattern, because you want to improve in that time and time, then that's one of my approaches.
Yeah. How do you deal with the chin up and pull up in that respect as well? Because they've got a higher barrier entry with regards to execution.
Yeah. So again, so obviously there's context, isn't there? So so if somebody's like, I cannot, all I've got is body weight, then for me, I'll be like, look, you need to invest in something. So I'd get them to invest in a band. So if you look at a band and a broomstick, and then you think, right, so if that's all I've got, and I haven't got a bar, I'm not going to hang off a door frame or anything like that, but all I've got is a broomstick and a band. I think that's achievable for people to actually invest in. And then from there, I would literally, so if you think about it, what do I have to build? I have to build my arms. I have to build like the tendons of my arms. I have to like strengthen my bicep. You can do that with
Yeah.
bands and a stick, and you can improve on that. At the same, so you can do like isometric contractions. You can tighten that band up by like doubling a loop and looping it over 2 or 3 times. So you can do quite a lot to actually strengthen up the arms. At the same time, if you're doing like the simple ones like the cobras, the prone tees, rear band pulls, you can really work the muscles at the back. You can even do like banded bent over rows.
Yeah.
You can do them like hands on the band, or you can use the stick. So you can do quite a lot to actually develop, not necessarily the chin itself, but the muscles involved. And like I said, you can like develop tendon strength, tendon health, the bicep, the triceps, muscles of the back, posterior cuff, all these things. So you can actually do quite a lot. So when they eventually say like, oh, I can now vest in a chin up, like their body's actually strong. So then for me, it would be right. It would start off if you I combine with you're gonna do as many. You're gonna hang from the bar as long as you can, and then once you reach 60 seconds, I want you to progress to a sternum pull. So that's actually going to work the shoulder blades. But immediately off that, I would say, right, hang on the bar as much as you can. Then you're going to drop off. Then you're going to do floor pull-ups. So basically, feet on the floor, and then you still go through that movement pattern. So I try and mimic that as much as I can. And then going back off that same principle of how I've done press-ups, I do a max test. And then once you reach 10, then obviously you can go into the 50%. But I would max reps for 3 sets, and continue like that until I can get 10, and then from there I go into that like right, it's going to be 50%, and then you accrue sets, so you've got quality every single time, and that's how I tend to do that from a chin up perspective.
So is the 50% like greasing the groove in that respect?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
because you remember you want quality, because if you consider it, like you want the nervous system to actually be attuned to that. For example, especially with chin ups, because you're not going to get somebody who's going to jump up and do 10 chin ups straight away. It's like they're going to get one. So when you tend to drop to say 50 or below, it's really low reps and really low reps. So you're looking at quality. And if you think about the things you can actually do from there, it could be like the first rep you're going to do like an isometric contraction or hold. But what I tend to do is on that last rep when I can see it, you say, look, let's say it's like you're doing six. You're going to do six and then a max hold. And that max hold, you're trying to like maximally contract your back, squeeze your scapula together and stuff like that, almost like snap the bar and then lower down under control. But if you think about that, you're combining that with an active hang straight into your floor pull-ups, and then from there you can whatever like press configuration would be. Then I would add in like a conditioning drill. So you might do, let's say for example, it would be a hang, a floor pull-up, a press up, and then it might be like 20 rear band pulls or 20 face pulls, because I really want to pump up the back muscles and
Yeah.
maximize engagement of the smaller muscles as well, because I can fatigue them. They're not really going to be as fatigued if I do like a floor pull up, because it's going to be slightly different. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
so like if you then have a focus on that from an upper, and then the recovery then would be like a lower body. So it might be lunges, squats, heels elevated glute bridge, or it might be like a variant of pistols, or single leg calf raises, or even explosive jumps.
Yeah.
Because I want to, if you think about tendon health, I want to like a fast dynamic movement will actually stiffen the tendon, which
Yeah.
which you sometimes can be a problem with people if they do too much too soon. So there's many ways you can actually do that. So again, if you think about that, look at how many variables that I can do compared to like somebody on a diet. Do you know what I mean? I've got more. Again, I'm going back to how
Yeah.
many levers have I actually got when it comes to
Yeah.
training, and then
Yeah.
particularly with body weight to actually expose, to burn calories, make them actually feel good, and go, fuck me, I've actually achieved a lot. Like if you think about like maybe 3 months ago, I was struggling doing a straight arm plank hold. Now I'm
Yeah.
doing press ups. Now I'm doing hangs. Now I'm doing inverted rows and different stuff like that. I'm doing all these band stuff. So it becomes like a 3 minute session. All of a sudden, 30 minutes, quite a lot. And it's, man, I've achieved like a shitload of stuff.
Yeah.
And for me, that keeps people enthused to want to go up to the next level. And me, I'm always waiting for people to ask me the question. So rather than tell them, oh, you need to do this and you need to do that, it's like when somebody gets confident, they'll come and say, Andy, I never really thought I'd be able to do this, but I really want to do, like if you look at the bodyweight world, when they start to do chin-ups and stuff like that, I've got clients go like, I wouldn't mind doing a handstand
Yeah.
hold, or I wouldn't mind being able to do a front lever, but they would never. You know, I wouldn't tell them that because that would be me pushing or impressing my idea
Yeah.
onto them and my bias. But
Yeah.
once you've actually like broken down the barrier and broken down the layers and give people confidence, they might. I mean, it could be like, oh, I want to try maybe barbell stuff, and if you think about it, if somebody's actually went through a real uh, progressively planned that body weight training, let's say for like 3 6 months, whatever it is, by the time they come to a barbell, you don't really have to coach as much. You don't have to talk about breathing and bracing because they've already learned that. Might have done a hollow body tuck hold, like you know what I mean, like planks, RKC planks, side bridges. They know how to brace. So when you then say, "Look, I want you to brace and hold your breath," it's the conversation is different.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're a coach and somebody comes in and goes, I want a deadlift, I'll be like, well, show me, can you do a push up? Can you do a squat? Can you do that? I'll be like, right, look, you're not ready for that yet. You need to actually do that. And then for me, if they say, oh, I still want to do a deadlift, well, find yourself another coach because
Yeah.
I mean that's I don't really see anybody like that. But when I was in a certain like part of the industry, I got to the point where I could actually refuse or say to people, look, I'm not your guy then because
Yeah.
this is my process. If you follow that, then you'll get the results that you actually seek, and that will be
Yeah.
consistently training long enough and feeling good about yourself.
Yeah. I think the chin up or the pull up is the game changer in bodyweight training in the sense that once you've been able to accomplish that, it unlocks so much more, as well as giving you the confidence because there is that barrier. The push up is relatively easy. You don't have to invest in any equipment, but the chin up it's a journey.
Yeah, I think you're right. For somebody to do a chin up, I think, especially like, for example, untrained, that is something that's actually like worthy of saying I've trained well for that because it's like quite. I think people who naturally can do chin ups. Do you know what I mean somebody's like naturally skinny, thin, whatever you want to call it, and I just suddenly done them. They don't really understand how difficult it actually is for somebody to go through a whole process of strengthening their body up. You know, like getting the biceps strong, like getting the back strong, getting the shoulders to have the ability to hang, then lose the weight.
Yeah,
That's another one. Do you know what I mean they're all? Do you know what I mean? I think when somebody actually reaches that, I think that's a much better achievement than, say, for example, like pulling a bar off the floor.
yeah,
Unless you're going for like something like a triple bodyweight deadlift. I mean, but somebody to actually go through a process really proves that they actually wanted to do it in the first place as well.
yeah. I would argue, this is just me because I'm biased, but mastering the body is the essence of training itself.
Say again, sorry.
Mastering body weight is the essence of training because
Yeah,
everything else is just it's just an item and it's an object. But to master yourself, it's I don't know. Maybe I'm getting a bit too deep there. You just led me on a train of thought. But Andy, I'm going to have to wrap this up. So before I do so, could you please tell me or tell the viewers where they can find you on YouTube, social media, Instagram, Facebook?
yeah. My YouTube, my YouTube channel's off. I need to actually do more YouTube. Actually, I need to start doing long form content. Um, Essentially, you can find me on IronMacFitness.com. Sorry, IronMacFitness. So IronMac Fitness. And that's on YouTube. I'm probably more active on Instagram. I've tried TikTok, but I just find the platform awful.
You're
Even
too
though
old for that, mate.
yeah, I am. I'm just there, and Facebook as well. But I'm mainly active on there. And then from a website perspective, I've got noweaklinks.co.uk, and that's where like I run like my online stuff. But I'm pretty active, and I'm not a. If you ask me a question on social media, I'll get back to you. And I
Yeah.
genuinely like that interaction. I haven't got enough followers or I'm not above my station yet after 20 years to. So I'm more. I enjoy the interaction and things like that. So that's where you can find me.
Well, I'll put all those links in the video description. But listen, Andy, that was fascinating. That truly was. You're a very, very interesting character, and your knowledge as well was quite astounding there, mate. You took me on a lot of trains of thought while we were talking there. So, Andy, that was an absolute pleasure. Hopefully, we can get you on again at some point, and we can, because we didn't really scratch the surface there. There's a lot more about training we could speak about as well.
Yeah, no, Lee, listen, mate, it'd be an absolute pleasure, mate. You're in Glasgow, mate, and next time I come up the road, mate, I'll definitely have to hit you up.
Hit me up, mate. We'll do some burpees together.
Burpees.
Right, listen, mate. Thanks very much. I'll talk to you later. Okay, buddy?
Aye, no dramas, mate.